to this press conference by the Brexit Party about Peterborough and about the by-election a few weeks ago. There's been lots of noise in the press about what may or may not have happened during the by-election. There have been allegations of impropriety and allegations of vote rigging and question marks about the presence of a particular individual in the count room and what he was doing in the Labour campaign. And before we carry on, we've just got a short video to show about Tariq Mahmood. How much did Lisa Forbes, the elected MP, know that she had a convicted electoral fraudster in her team who would count as an agent? Why did the Labour Party deny his involvement when clearly one can see that he was significantly involved? Why was Tariq Mahmood unauthorised in the inner count room? Why did the council initially deny that he was in the inner count room until we presented clear photographic evidence? There have been all sorts of rumours. Why were the rumours that morning that the Labour Party had won by 500 votes? There are so many questions. We need answers. And the only mechanism available to us to get those answers is to lodge a petition under the Representation of People Act 1983. So we will be doing that this week. That is the only mechanism available to properly investigate what has gone on, but also to shine a spotlight on the postal vote system. Because let's be very clear, we've had clear statements from judges in the Earlham and Rahman case. We've had the Pickles Review in 2016, and yet the government has done nothing about it. it is patently obvious there are real concerns across the whole country about the postal vote system. 29% of votes cast in this election in Peterborough, 29% were by postal vote. The national average is 20%. Before the postal vote system changed in 2001, it was just 2%. There are very, very real concerns about the postal vote system, and this fundamentally comes down to trust in our democracy. And we, the Brexit Party, we are about changing politics for good, and it is absolutely essential that trust in our democracy is paramount. Nigel, do you want to add to those thoughts?
Yeah, I'll do it for a minute. Richard, I said to Richard Tice on the night of the Peterborough by-election, I hope we win. One, because it will be a remarkable thing to do with only 2 weeks of campaigning and no data, but secondly, because somebody at some point needs to blow the lid on what has gone wrong with our democracy, and postal votes is a very major part of that. This is not the first, and I know that by doing it now, some will say, oh, well, it's sour grapes. No, it isn't. Actually, as far as I'm concerned, this is about a lot more than Peterborough. It's about a system that is wide open to corruption, to intimidation, to bribery, to abuse on a whole number of levels. I have mentioned this in the past. I mentioned it in South Shields when there was a by-election a few years ago when nearly 60% of the vote was in the postal vote. I mentioned it before in Wythenshawe when I watched the postman delivering the postal votes in an area midweek, an area inhabited chiefly by elderly people, and I watched a party official 100 yards behind the postman knocking on the door, hello, I've come to collect your postal vote. I've seen by-elections where the by-election's been called and the postal votes have actually been issued before any other political party has even got a chance to get its campaign off the ground. It doesn't work. I'm not completely opposed to postal votes. I think if you're 94 and in a wheelchair or serving in the army overseas, there is legitimate reason, if you ask for it, to have a postal vote. That is a system we had for years. As Richard said, 2 to 3% of votes in any one election would be through that form. There are other countries, such as France, who see postal voting as being so open to corruption, they don't allow any of it. Either way, case after case we've seen, haven't we? Tower Hamlets, Birmingham, Glenrothes in Scotland, Peterborough, and many others all around the country, not just perpetrated by the Labour Party, it has to be said. Other parties have also been found guilty of this, which is why, in many ways, my previous criticisms of this were perhaps whistling in the wind. But I do think at a time when there is a big national debate about our trust in democracy, about the way the whole system is working or not working, I do think now is a very important, a very good moment to do this. And I very much hope that the Electoral Court in Peterborough delve very deeply into the many, many issues, family voting, so many other issues that we could talk about, and in particular, multiple occupancy households, etc. So if you say it's sour grapes, you can say it, but actually, it is time we change politics for good, and my ambition would be, by the next general election, to get rid of this current postal voting system, to get back to postal votes for those who really need it, and to stop the abuse that we've seen growing year on year since 2001, when it first began. Thank you.
I think just the final point to add, why is it that there is a sense of fear, of intimidation, as we have started to speak to people at certain addresses in certain wards? Why is it that people's statements about how many postal voters they have in their property have changed in just a 24-hour period? These are really serious concerns about what's going on, about the level of intimidation, potential bullying, and we need to eradicate this in our voting system. Any questions? Hi.
Peter Walker from the Guardian. There's a lot of rumours floating around about this, what supposedly went on. Do you actually have any evidence that there was wrongdoing, or was it more kind of hearsay and things like that? And if I could, seeing I've come all this way, if I could ask a second question to Nigel, which is slightly off topic. You and Steve Bannon had a lot of talks, and it came out of the weekend that Boris Johnson has also been talking to him. Do you see any similarity between the three of you in the way you approach politics, in this kind of, you know, I speak on behalf of the people populist way? Sorry.
Sure, yes. No, you're absolutely right. Look, there are lots of rumours and lots of hearsay, some of which is just that. There is evidence emerging. That will all be presented to the Electoral Court. It's wrong to, you know, prejudge that or announce that now. But you know, it's only by having a full petition, an open, transparent inquiry, that we can actually truly get to the bottom of what may or may not have happened, both here, but also actually the lessons for the broader system. This is the only mechanism, and that is why it needs to be done. Nothing less, nothing more.
Well, on your question, it must be a rotten day for you lot. I'm very sorry. Very tough for The Guardian that Sir Nick Clegg has come out and said that, of course, there was absolutely no Russian interference in the referendum. You must be very cheesed off with that, you lot, because you've written repeatedly that it was. On the Bannon thing, well, look, I've known Steve Bannon since 2012, and there's no great secret about that. Boris, of course, got to know Bannon when he was Foreign Secretary, when he was visiting Washington and going into the West Wing, and that's how those two got to know each other. The idea that somehow the three of us are all deeply interconnected is simply not right. And, you know, Steve likes to be seen to be at the centre of the action. He knows Boris, he speaks to Boris. Steve speaks to virtually everybody.
Hi there, George Roberts from the BBC. Hello. Police have, I think, stopped investigating 3 of the 5 allegations in relation to Peterborough. The gentleman before me touched on evidence. Is that not enough for you? 2 of those allegations that have already been dismissed were in relation to postal voting. So are you not accepting that? That seems to be an indication that these things are perhaps unfounded. But if I could also allow you to indulge me on a few off-topic questions as well. Tobias Elwood commenting today on, he seems to indicate that there's no numbers. There's numbers there in Parliament to stop a no-deal Brexit, whoever becomes next Prime Minister, to stop that from going through. Can I ask you both to comment on that? And also, just one more thing, Boris, can I ask you to comment on whether or not this discussion surrounding his private life should be valid in the public domain? Thank you.
You do, Peter, run on.
So just on the, you're right that the police have, we understand, they've done some investigations into certain allegations. None of those came from us. We understand they may have actually had more, and they chose to look into certain things. In a sense, it's in response to all of this noise that we started to look into it, and that concerns were raised. And as I say, the only way that you can actually really dig into what truly did or did not happen is to have a petition. But, you know, there is significant concern, there is evidence emerging which requires proper investigation, proper analysis. And, you know, this is the first time that actually this will be done on an open, transparent and clear way. And that has to be good for democracy, it has to be good for trust in democracy, and that is why it's essential that it's done.
Yeah, the track record is appalling. And of course, you know, quite common practice now that on polling day, people turn up with a carrier bag with a very large number of postal votes in it. That's just one example of a system that we think is wide open to abuse. On your other questions, Boris, look, he had a row. Well, I'm sure that everyone's had a row from time to time. The fact that it was recorded through the walls by the neighbours and given to The Guardian is appalling. Quite where the limits end with this sort of thing, I don't know. Is it a matter of public record and public interest? Yes, it is, because the police were called. Simple as that. Had the police not been called, had it been an internal dispute, then I don't think it should be something Boris comments on. As the police were called, I'm actually astonished that he didn't say, look, the police were called, in my view, maliciously, by a neighbour, looking to cause problems. When the police assessed the scene, they realised there wasn't a problem and they left. I think, actually, that might have ended the story. But I feel by completely ducking it on Saturday, there's a danger this goes on for day after day after day. On your comment about no-deal Brexit, WTO Brexit, managed deal Brexit, call it what you will, but on this date of the 31st of October, quite interesting. I mean, if you look at the opinion polling yesterday published, you know, given the choice, if there is no treaty passed, which it's failed 3 times, it looks pretty unlikely, what would you rather do on the 31st of October? Leave on WTO terms or have a delay in a second referendum? Figures are really interesting. 48% said leave on WTO terms, 40% said delay and second referendum. So what is actually happening here is Brexit fatigue is manifesting itself with people saying, right, let's just go. We don't care what economic threats we're being given, let's just go. Brexit actually has never had a bigger majority than it's had at any point in the last 3 years since that sunny morning of the 24th of June 2016, when nobody imagined it would be quite as difficult as this. And I would just say this, numbers in Parliament get easier if numbers in the country change. But if, indeed, his own party and others in the House of Commons intend to bring him down, if Boris wins, and I'm still assuming that he will, seems to me that the very large number of people, the blue wave that's joined the Conservative Party in the last 6 months or more, they're going to vote for Boris whatever because they see him as the Brexiteer. If Boris wins, it may well be that the only way to get Brexit, a clean Brexit, is to recognise that this Parliament is never, ever going to deliver it, and therefore call a general election on the issue. If he did, I think he could win it by a very large majority.
I just want to add to that. It's over 2 weeks now since we delivered a letter to the current Prime Minister asking that we should be allowed in to look at the state of no-deal preparations. It's pretty shocking that we've had no reply either from the Prime Minister or from any of the candidates. When you think there's still another 4 weeks to go, are we really inferring that nothing is going on? There is no one better than ourselves and some of our elected MEPs, given that we had a direct democratic mandate to be involved in the negotiations. We should be allowed in to look at the state of these preparations so that we know what's going on, so that we can give confidence to the people about leaving on a WTO Brexit, and that should happen now.
Mr Farage, Nathan from ITV News. Tobias Elwood has said Boris Johnson's stance no deal could push through Tory MPs to support a no-confidence motion in a potential Boris Johnson government. Do you think that would happen, and does he have your support?
Well, he'll have my support if he does the right thing, but I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, this was the guy who twice voted against the new European treaty and wrote in his column in the Telegraph that it was vassalage, that we become a slave state. I mean, I rather agreed with all of that. And then, despite having said those things, at the third time of asking, he votes for it. So I'd love to know who the real Boris Johnson is. I'd love to know what he really, really, truly believes. And our attitude, as the Brexit Party, is why would we trust anybody? I mean, the previous she's still there, I guess, but the previous Prime Minister told us 108 times we were leaving on March 29th. We didn't. Boris now tells us 4 times in his column this morning that we're leaving on the 31st of October, and we are pretty sceptical about that. So what we're doing as a party is we're getting ourselves ready. This Sunday will be our first ever party meeting. All the previous ones were public events. It's our first ever party meeting in Birmingham. We're interviewing candidates on a very, very large scale, and we are gearing up to fight the next general election. If Boris Johnson was to absolutely stand up and fight for us leaving on the 31st of October, whatever the risk to his own career, well, then we take a different view. At the moment, we don't believe a word they say. We don't trust anybody.
Hi, John Crace from The Guardian. There have been rumours of dark arts and abuse of proxy voting and intimidation in the Tory leadership election. Would you like to see the Electoral Commission called in to investigate that?
Well, I think it's a bit too late because Aaron Banks has signed up 40,000 new members of the Conservative Party. I think actually, to be honest with you, the result's a foregone conclusion. But if we want to clean up politics for good, then we should pursue all methods. Absolutely.
Good.
All right.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.